Welcome once again to the Russell Brown Show and this advanced tutorial on using Dr. Brown's 123 process. In this tutorial, I'm going to discuss 4 different topics. I'm going to first start with this one right up here. Open first image to apply settings. I'm going to discuss how to use this effectively when processing images. Then, moving down here to output profiles. I'm going to talk about working with CMYK. Then, over here, I'm going to talk about sharpening your images. 2 different techniques are going to be shown in this fine presentation. One where I adjust the resize settings under the preferences to bicubic sharper, bicubic smoother, or just plain bicubic. Then, finally, I'll show you how to run an action that will sharpen your images. And of course, I'll discuss whether to run that action after the image resize or before the image resize, as you see here. Then, of course, finally, I'm going to talk about applying metadata and how to use an action to apply this metadata. And to top all of this off, what if I were to show you how to combine multiple actions together? For example, what if I want to apply metadata and sharpen the image, all in one big action? Yes, I will close it off with that one. So let's get this started and talk about open first image right up here at the top. But first, I'm going to cancel from this dialog and set up my color settings here inside of Photoshop. From the edit menu, I'm going to go down to color settings and show you how I have set things up to work best with Dr. Brown's 123 process. So here in the color settings dialog, I want you to notice this area right here, the color management policies. Notice that I'm preserving the embedded profiles for RGB, CMYK, and grayscale images. And on top of that, right here, I've unchecked the Ask When Opening. I've done this because Photoshop is opening and closing images of different profiles, and it's best that you do not want to see dialogues appear during this process. So by setting it up this way, you can ensure that Photoshop will take over and do the right thing, especially with Dr. Brown's 123 process. Okay, now you know. I'm going to click Cancel because I did not make any adjustments, but those are my recommendations. So now let's go back here to the bridge application, because this process of opening the first image is especially and uniquely designed for camera raw images. And here you can see I've selected a group of camera raw images. Now I'm going to select a series of these images, just like this, because I'd like to process this group of images. But I'd like to make adjustments to all of them in the process of converting them with the processor. Okay, you'll see in a minute. With those selected, I now go up here to my Tools menu, down to Dr. Brown Services, and over here to Dr. Brown's 123 process. So here we are back in the dialog. The first thing we want to do is to turn on Open First Image right here at the top. Then, of course, selecting our destination for our images, and then finally, how do we want to process these images? I'm going to keep this fairly simple during this project. I'm not going to run any actions. I'm just going to convert them. Now, what we're going to do is click Run right up here, and the first thing that will appear is a dialog asking us for that first image. You have to search through your directories until you find the first image that you're working with. In this case, it's this image right here, and I select it and I get a preview. I can see, comparing these side by side, that yes, indeed, that is my first image. If I click Open, okay, here it is, open inside of Camera Raw, that first image we just selected. The key advantage to selecting this item in the 123 process dialog is that you can now make adjustments to this single image that will be applied to all the other images which were selected in the bridge. For example, I want to set the depth to 16-bit. I want to set the color space to Pro Photo RGB right here. I might want to increase the resolution to 300 pixels per inch. And finally, I may want to downsample it slightly here inside of Camera Raw. Then over here under Adjustment, Detail, Lens, Curve, and Calibrate, I can make any adjustment here, and these adjustments will then be applied across all of the selected images. For example, I want to bring up the saturation across all of the selected images, so I adjust it here. I might want to bring up the brightness across all the images, so I make a little adjustment right there. I then click Open. And by clicking Open, it's going to take all the settings I just set and apply them to all the other images in this set of selected images from the bridge. And on top of that, it's only going to be a temporary adjustment. It's not going to set those adjustments and apply them to the image. It's only going to use those adjustments to process the images. So it's a great way just to quickly make some adjustments to the images without altering the existing Camera Raw settings. Now, I say that for the majority of the images. This technique will, however, adjust the settings for the first image in the selected set. In this case, it's this Iceland 01.cr2, this one right here. Okay, the processing is complete. Let's, of course, go to our desktop. Let's hide Photoshop, and let's hide the bridge. Go here to the desktop, and here are our finished images inside set number 1. So they've been processed. And in fact, if we double click on this image and open it up, down here you'll notice that the image is a Pro Photo image. Okay, that was step number 1, how to use Open First Image. Let's talk about color settings and CMYK. I'm going to close this down, and let's open back up the bridge and bring this forward and talk about converting an image to CMYK. Now, in fact, I didn't want to go all the way back to the bridge. I actually want to go to Photoshop. So here, inside of Photoshop, I'm going to go to the Edit menu, and once again down here to Color Settings, because I want to point out what happens when you convert to CMYK inside of 123 Process. The settings it uses are right here for conversion to CMYK. I've selected US Sheet-Fed Uncoded V2. If you wanted to adjust this to any of the other set defaults here, you merely select it here and then run 123 Process, and it will use this conversion technique when processing your images. I'm going to set this back to my default. In fact, I'm just going to click here on Custom and select Russell's Settings right there. I'm going to click OK. So here we are back in the bridge. I select all my images. I go up to Tools, Dr. Brown Services, and once again to 123 Process. Here in the dialog, we want to make sure that we turn off Open First Image, because we're going to focus here on Output Profile right here. And I wanted to select Working CMYK. So it's going to take the working CMYK settings that we set up earlier, and it's going to use those to process the image. I'm going to click Run. It will now go through, once again, open up these raw images. In fact, it would open up raw, TIFF, or even PSD images, and convert them to CMYK using those settings and place them into our folder. So there was tip and technique number 2, converting images to CMYK and how you can control that. Now let's talk about sharpening your images and the 2 methods that I discussed. Okay, let's move forward. Back to our images here again. In this case, I'm just going to select one image from this group. Again, up to Tools, Dr. Brown Services, and 123 Process. Now I want to demonstrate some techniques for sharpening. Let's convert this back here to same as source, and we have PSD selected here. That's great, because now we want to turn on actions. The key and most fantastic thing about working with 123 Process is that you can add actions to supplement some of the things that happen within this process. Sharpening. One of the first methods for sharpening is the ability to adjust the way that resizing takes place. If I cancel from here for a moment and go back here to Photoshop and go into our preferences here for Photoshop, the general preferences, you can see that image interpolation can be done in these 5 different ways: nearest neighbor, bilinear, bicubic smoother, and bicubic sharper. Now, wouldn't it be great if you had the access to these different types of interpolation during the process of scaling up or scaling down your image? Well, you can. You can merely access these through an action. If I cancel from that and move over here, you can see I have a series of actions I've created earlier here inside of Photoshop. One of them here is called resize bicubic sharper, bicubic smoother, and just plain bicubic. It's just a simple action that I've recorded, and I go into the preferences and I set the preferences. That's all the action is. So let's use these actions back in 123 Process. I target my image, Tools, Services, 123 Process. So I want to use that action that I created. I've targeted my image. I have it all selected. Let's select same as source. Let's run the action and let's select it right here. For example, I want to run this as bicubic sharper right there. I may be reducing these down in size, let's say, and I want them to sharpen as they get smaller. Now, because I'm running bicubic sharper and it's part of the processing, it's important that I set when it actually is applied. We don't want to reset to bicubic sharper after the image resize. We want to select here and run it before the image resize right there. So before is critical when adjusting the settings for bicubic sharper, smoother, or just plain bicubic, because we're merely setting the function and then it does the resize. Again, if you're adjusting these with this action, be sure to set them back to your standard setting if you're doing any other processing. Because once this is set, it's set in your preferences for all of your resizing within Photoshop. Just something you should know. Okay, that's one method for sharpening images. What about a standard sharpen or unsharp mask? To do that, once again, I went back here to Photoshop and I created a sharpen action right here. Once again, I opened up the image, went to my filter menu, and I ran an unsharp mask. I saved this as a 100% value, and I also saved one here at a 50% value. Let's go ahead now and apply these. Let's go back to the bridge and let's select some different images here, some PSD images. Let's select one of our images, then go up here to the tools again and back down here to 123 Process. Now once again, we're going to go in and select a special action. Right here we click on Run Action. Let's go over here and select this sharpen action. For example, we want to sharpen it 100%. We select that. Now the next most important thing, once again, is to select when this action should run. And in this case, of a action that sharpens an image, we'd want to sharpen it after it has resized the image. Right here, after image resize is correctly selected. Then click Run, and it will then process this and sharpen it after the resize. Okay, that was our third in a series of tips and techniques for using actions and other settings here inside of 123 Process. Our final technique is when we're going to apply metadata. Now, we of course know how to apply metadata. In this case, I'm going to double click on an image here from the bridge and it opens up inside Photoshop. Then from the File menu, I'm going to go down here to File Info, right here. As you know, under this dialog, you can set important document title information, author information, keywords, and descriptions, and going through each of these fields and then adding in the appropriate items that you'd want. Now what I did is I went through and created a default set of information or metadata that I could apply to all of my images. I've entered the data into this particular image. Then from this flyout arrow over here, I can then save this metadata as a template. And as you can see here, I named it Russell's Standard Template. Okay, that's step number 1 to this whole process. You need some sort of standard template, just like this. Then, canceling from this, you could start and record an action over here in the Actions palette. As you can see here, I have one called Apply Standard Metadata. And if I toggle this down, you can see that I've actually gone in, targeted an image while this action is running, like this, recorded the actual process of going to the File menu, and then I also recorded the application of Russell's Standard Template. It records all of that into a nice little package. You then stop the recording, and of course, close this image, go back to the bridge, select the images that you'd like to apply your template to, as you can see here. Then once again, up to Dr. Brown's 123 process. Then here in the dialog, again, we're going to run the action, select the action here, apply metadata, and it will then apply the metadata across those images. In terms of running this before or after, it doesn't matter because the data is added before the image is processed and after the image is processed and has no effect over the image, but the data is still there. Now, in conclusion, I'm going to demonstrate how to combine 2 separate actions together. In this case, I'd like to apply metadata and sharpen. So let's cancel from this dialog and direct our eyes over here to the Actions palette right over here. As we saw earlier, I have a sharpen action right here and I have an apply metadata here. I'd like to combine the 2 together. First, I need to open up an image. I'm going to double click just on one of the images here in my set, right here. Then I'm going to go over here to my Actions palette and create a new action. Let's call this Metadata Sharpen. Metadata Sharpen. Just like that. And record. Then I'm going to target the sharpening that I would like to apply to this image in this combined action. I'm going to select Sharpen 100%, a previous action I created. Then here from the Flyout menu in the Actions tabbed palette, I'm going to select Play. It will then play that action as part of this new action I'm creating. Now I would like to add a second action. In this case, I'd like to apply the metadata. Selecting the previously recorded standard metadata action here, I'm selecting it as you can see. Then again from the Flyout arrow, I'm going to play that action. So what I have now is a new action which plays 2 other actions. I stop the recording. I can then go over here and close this image, go back here to Adobe Bridge, select my target images, bring up Dr. Brown's 123 process one more time, but this time we will have a brand new action available to us. Under our processor actions, we can go down here and we have Metadata Sharpen, the one we just created. I select that. Let's select our output profile. And do we want to run this before or after? We want to run the sharpening and the metadata after the image resize by selecting it here. So all our settings are made. We've got our size correct. And we click Run. So we'll now go through and open up each of these images, put in the metadata and sharpen it after the resize, and place the results onto our desktop into our targeted folder. Okay, there you have it. You've just seen 4 great ways to combine actions and to work with color settings to enhance Dr. Brown's 123 process. Then next time you're processing enormous groups of images and you need to process them with control and speed and actually still have time for lunch, you're looking for Dr. Brown's 123 process. Give it a try.